The 2025 Grammy nominations are in, and I wanted to take a moment and give some of what I perceive to be the snubs, but particularly in the Best Alternative Music Album category. This has long been my favorite category because it kind of expands across several indie-like subgenres. You've got actual alternative rock, I think 90s alternative. You've got indie rock, indie pop, electronic indie. You've got shoegaze, folk rock, blues rock, psych rock, indie soul. You've got all kinds of different styles of rock-like permutations, and they are all under this umbrella that could qualify as best alternative music. So you get some of the more interesting nominations, assuming they don't go with the lazy picks. And what I mean by lazy picks is you've got certain artists that it seems like anytime they drop an album, they're filling up one of the 5 slots nominations wise. Like anytime Coldplay drops, Coldplay has won this award twice. There are 3 artists that have won this award 3 times: Beck, Radiohead, and White Stripes. So like when Beck drops, I'm all but certain that he's going to be nominated in Best Alternative Music. By the way, Bjork's been nominated like 8 or 9 times, but has not won once. I've done a few videos on how crazy that is, but yeah, Beck has won 3 times, Radiohead 3 times, White Stripes 3 times. So you have like these legacy acts where it's like such an obvious pick, like, oh God, okay, so you're gonna go with like Arcade Fire or U2 or St. Vincent, who is nominated again this year. And not to say that any of these people release bad music or anything like that, but why go with the obvious picks when there's so much interesting music that I'm sure the Recording Academy and its voting members are being exposed to? So it's like, okay, you're gonna go with The National or Radiohead instead of going with, I don't know, Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. I'm just naming an artist that I really love, especially those first 2 albums. But I always feel like there's a lot that's left on the table, and there are artists that drop projects that are so critically acclaimed and just so enjoyable and interesting to listen to that usually don't get nominated here. I get it, it's the Grammys. It's not like what is your favorite underground pick or what is the most critically acclaimed album. It's not even about being the best album of the year. It is, you have to have some name recognition and some stature, I get it, to be considered here. I just wish that I often saw more of what I noticed to be accepted, at least among the music community, as being some of the best albums of the year in this category. So like this year, the best alternative music album nominees are Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. I actually like that pick. I know that he's been around releasing a ton of albums, but even his last few albums have been phenomenal, very emotional. He's had like a tragic loss of, I think, like multiple children. And, you know, he's got like this album Ghost Teen that's about one. He's got an album called Skeleton Key about that type of grief. But yeah, he's nominated here with Wild God. Clyro is nominated here with Charm. Kim Gordon, she was in Sonic Youth, and she's nominated here with The Collective. This was an interesting kind of industrial trap style album. Very interesting. Kim Gordon, yeah. And then Brittany Howard of Alabama Shakes, nominated here with her second solo album, What Now? And then you've got St. Vincent, again, 2-time winner, nominated here with All Born Screaming. So I would say that the obvious pick here, you know, is St. Vincent. That's the one that I'm not surprised to see. You know, the other 4, I'm more or less okay with those nominations, even though I feel like the ones, or at least many of the ones that I'm about to name, were either as good or perhaps even better. I know it's all subjective, it's all preference based, taste based, but these were albums that I thought should have definitely got considered, and I don't know why some of them aren't on here. First of all, Vampire Weekend, one of the 2-time winners, wasn't even nominated with Only God Was Above Us. And this was a case of one of those legacy acts, Vampire Weekend, that I thought actually belonged here because they actually dropped one of the best albums of 2024. So I don't, you know, there is a submission process, and that's another thing here. I don't know which of these artists actually even submitted their work to be considered for nomination. So maybe Vampire Weekend said, you know what, let's let some of the young blood, let's let some of the younger acts, you know, the lesser established acts, let them get their shine. We've already won this thing twice. Let's not even submit our work. I suspect that that might have happened there, because otherwise I don't know how Vampire Weekend's Only God Was Above Us doesn't get nominated here. You get what I'm saying? And when I first looked at this list, I thought that these 2 people were snubbed. I thought Waxahachie should have been nominated with Tiger's Blood, and I thought Adrienne Lenker of Big Thief, her solo album, Bright Future, I thought that should have been nominated, but then I looked at the other categories and I saw that Waxahachie actually is Grammy nominated with Tiger's Blood only in the Americana, Best Americana Album category. And I thought that that was pretty cool because Waxahachie, if you know something about her career around when she was making albums like Cerulean Salt and Ivy Trip, my favorite album of hers, even though I love that last one, St. Cloud as well. But Waxahachie kind of went from being a DIY indie rock artist to being a true country adjacent Americana artist. It's been an interesting evolution, but yeah, so she was nominated, just not in Best Alternative. I get it. Americana is actually more appropriate of a classification here. And then Adrienne Lenker of Big Thief was actually nominated for Best Folk Album. So she didn't get snubbed. Again, just a different category. But these other albums I thought really should have been considered. Magdalena Bay, Imaginal Disc. I don't know how that one doesn't get nominated. That one is making all kinds of waves with, you know, there was recently a late night performance that went kind of viral, and the album itself is going to be on a lot of those best albums of 2024 lists. Magdalena Bay, I thought should have been considered. Again, I'm just assuming that they submitted at least some of their work. But if you haven't heard Magdalena Bay's Imaginal Disc, give that a listen. The production is phenomenal. It's kind of dream popish. It's a little psychedelic. It's very woozy. It's a little bit disorientating, but it's also extremely pleasant. It's not hard on the ears to listen to. Another kind of woozy psychedelic, what do they call it? Hypnagogic, how do you pronounce hypnagogic pop? Spirit of the Beehive, another interesting band, but I'm not surprised they were not nominated. They're, you know, a lot newer, and I don't think that their album is getting the same level of shine as Magdalena Bay. Like Spirit of the Beehive isn't doing that level of like late night performance. Dive, I thought had a pretty good shoegaze album with Frog in Boiling Water. Hooray for the Riff Raff. This one is going to be near the top 10 of my best albums of 2024 list. Hooray for the Riff Raff. She's been around for a while. She's kind of that, you know, folk rock style singer-songwriter. She had a phenomenal album this year. Give it a listen. It's called The Past Is Still Alive. I wanted to see her nominated for Best Alternative Music, if not one of those other categories like Best Folk, Best Americana, because her album could kind of classify in either one of those, but I would have thought that it would be Best Alternative, but she doesn't appear to be nominated for either. MGMT, I thought, came strong this year, not with the same level of singles that they had back in the day with Time to Pretend, Electric Feel, and Kids, but a really good album, Loss of Life. I would have, you know, been happy with seeing that here. English Teacher, this kind of, you know, punk, post-punk style band. I know that it might be too early in their career, but they had a really good album called This Could Be Texas. Give that a listen. Mk.gee has been making waves this year. He's kind of, it's hard to classify. It's like lo-fi singer-songwriter with, you know, some jangled guitar, but almost soulful R&B-ish crooning, a little bit of emo, very interesting mix of genres, and the lo-fi-ness makes it even that much more interesting. He dropped an album called Two Star and the Dream Police. Give that album a listen. Julia Holter, she's been around in the indie sphere for a while. She had a really good album called Something in the Room She Moves. She had another album this year that was a collab, and it was almost ambient music. And this album, Something in the Room She Moves, could also be classified as new age and ambient. So it could have even been nominated there, but Julia Holter has traditionally been kind of like an indie-ish artist. Really good album. I expect to see that on a lot of best albums of 2024 lists. Then you've got Mannequin P word, or you could call it Mannequin Kitty. Mannequin P and Mannequin Kitty sound a little bit silly. Look up the actual name. You could deduce where I'm going with that. I just don't want my YouTube video taken down. But Mannequin P or Mannequin Kitty, they had an album that I expect to see on a lot of lists this year. You've got Helado Negro, who's, you know, been around for a while, dropping quality albums, who had another good release this year. You had Pond, who was the bass player of Tame Impala around the Inner Speaker Lonerism period of Tame Impala. It's Nick Albrook, who's got his own band Pond, which Kevin Parker has also played in the past. They all come from the same Perth, Australia camp. So they all had like bands that were kind of working together, members, you know, working in multiple bands, that kind of scene. But yeah, Pond, they've been around for a while. Dropped a really good album this year. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, probably the most prolific psych rock artist of the past 20 years. They've dropped like 20 something albums, if not more. In fact, let me just look it up. 26 studio albums. And again, they've only been around since like 2012. So think about that, 26 albums in 12 years. more than 2 albums per year. They dropped like 5 albums, I think, in 2022. And that was the second year. That was the second time that they've had 1 year and 5 albums in that 1 year. One of the most shape-shifting, genre-bending artists or bands out there. Really, I urge you to get into King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. If you like prog rock, if you like psych rock, dream pop, this last album has a little bit of like, almost a little bit of kind of country, folk, Americana. There's a little bit of that there, but they've had, you know, metal albums like that Dragon one from last year. They've basically dabbled in just about everything in the rock landscape, and they've amassed this like gargantuan discography where there's so many different albums with so many different sounds. Just an outstanding band altogether. They dropped another good album this year, B741. I would have liked to have seen them nominated here. Then you've got Cindy Lee with Diamond Jubilee. This is an album that you can't find on Spotify. You can't find it on Apple Music. If you go to the record shop even, you can't find a vinyl of it or a CD of it or a digital download of it. Cindy Lee had this marketing strategy with this Diamond Jubilee album where you could only listen to the album really on YouTube in just one big file. Look up, go to YouTube, you can find Cindy Lee Diamond Jubilee. The artist behind it, behind the Cindy Lee project, just announced that they're actually gonna finally release this project, spearheaded by Patrick Flegel, who was the lead singer of the band Women. They're gonna release this vinyl in a few months, basically. So they're finally gonna have a hard copy release of this thing. But right now, again, don't even try finding it on Spotify. You can find older Cindy Lee projects on, you know, Spotify, but Diamond Jubilee, which is getting all kinds of like sort of underground Reddit-based acclaim. It's a very interesting listen, very psychedelic. I would also classify it in that hypnagogic pop style. It's got a lot of woozy twists and turns, kind of disorienting production, different changes of vibes, and these different grooves, almost Deer Hunter-like, that you could really just kind of get immersed in. Very interesting album, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's near the top of a lot of best albums of 2024 lists. You're gonna see that name, Cindy Lee, Diamond Jubilee, down the line. As more people become aware of this project, you're gonna start seeing that name pop up. And I'm imagining or assuming that Cindy Lee might not have submitted their work, this album, for Grammy consideration. So again, a lot of that comes into play when you see who's eventually nominated. You've got this band Dead, who dropped an album, Poetry. Dead has a member who used to be in the Chicago band Knee High. I remember shooting them at the Echoplex, opening up for this other Chicago band, Twin Peaks, at the time. This is like 2016 or something like that, maybe 2017. But yeah, Dead, they've got a few albums out now, and Poetry, their latest, might be their best all-around album. I'm still considering that, I'm not sure, but yeah, really good and interesting, you know, kind of blend of indie rock and some of that jangle guitar play. And then you've got Mk.gee from Niger with Funeral for Justice. Mk.gee's got this kind of psychedelic, very percussive, very almost Fela Kuti with more a psychedelic rock edge. Very interesting to listen to. I like the last album actually probably more than this Funeral for Justice album, but Mk.gee is a name that's really been buzzing more and more in the past couple of years. I would have been interested to see him nominated for Best Alternative Music Album. But yeah, those are some of my snubs right there. Let me know what you thought should have been nominated. If you're into this genre, this alternative indie space, let me know what you would have liked to have seen nominated in this category. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. I'm Woog, thanks for tuning in.